John. How are you doing?
Very well.
Where from the world are you joining us this afternoon? Or is it morning? I guess afternoon.
So I'm in Geneva at the moment, having coffee in our offices in Geneva.
That's really good. I'm glad you made time to have this chat with me. I think there's so much exciting things going on right now with the Food Systems Summit and the dialogue. And I know you've been a really critical part of this dialogue. So it's truly a pleasure. And thank you.
No, it's great. It's great to have a chat.
Yeah, so I realize that you have very many backgrounds and contexts, and so probably view the whole food system in a very holistic way and get to see different aspects of it. But you've chosen to be more proactive in the innovation level, right? And this is where you're a
Yeah.
sponsor.
Well, that's right. I'm together with Mercy Corps. We're chairing the innovation lever for the Food System Summit, which is fun because it's a cross-cutting lever. You have 5 major action tracks of the Food System Summit. For the 5 major objectives for the Food System Summit, and then you have 4 cross-cutting levers, and gender, human rights, finance, and innovations. So innovation is one of those 4 cross-cutting levers. So I chair that lever.
That's great. So of course I have to ask the most basic question. In your opinion, how do you define innovation?
No, I mean, I think it's actually a very good question because you can narrowly define innovation in terms of science and technology. People often think of it in terms of digital transformation or new seed varieties or things like that. But actually, the way that I define innovation is in a much broader sense. Mm-hmm. And actually, a transition to food systems really is going to require that we innovate at many levels. It's not just about the science and technology innovation component of that, it's how we innovate around the way we meet. I think the food systems dialogues is a great example. And we're going to need to innovate in terms of the way we develop policy, in terms of the way we have partnerships. So in terms of the way that we think about working together. So I look at innovation in that much broader sense, including social and institutional innovation.
Yeah, you can almost argue innovation is very much a cultural change management topic, right? It's changing how we do almost everything, right?
Yeah. So it's a key component of change, absolutely. Actually, innovation is coming out quite strongly in the Food System Summit dialogues. And a lot of countries are saying we need to innovate in our country specific to our own country context. And so actually the idea of creating innovation ecosystems is coming out in several of the action tracks and how you would do that. If that's going to be for resilience in a highly fragile area within a country, that's going to be different to in a large urban environment. And so then what is that innovation that's required? I think one of the other agendas that's coming up quite strongly is governance, and the fact that actually a systems approach requires us to innovate and do things quite differently.
I like that you mentioned that, this aspect around regional context, cultural context, and governance, because those are very community specific topics. You can imagine the issues in North America would be very different from the ones innovation would be facing in Kenya in terms of infrastructure and policy around which kind of stakeholders are engaged and what level. So I really love that we keep that context. So for me, really what's really exciting for me, since of course I'm a woman and my background is in science, I always think of how can we pull in the gender aspect into the food systems, especially in incorporating gender equity into those spaces, whether it's through the governance or the science and technology or infrastructure. What role does women and youth play in this space?
If you take digital and finance, there was a lot of conversation around how do you innovate finance in a way that supports the needs of women, which may be different based on different cultural biases, or youth, which often who don't have any kind of historical record or that allows them to bank in a more traditional way. And so then how do you develop those systems? Or is it the kinds of partnerships that we have? How do we innovate in a way? In Asia, there was a partnership they were talking about called Grow Her, which is coming up, which is looking at different ways to engage and involve women, and the same with youth in terms of entrepreneurship. How do you design dynamic ecosystems at a country level that bring forward a whole next generation of youth that are excited about being in agriculture, rather than seeing it as this occupation that maybe their grandparents did or their parents did, which actually was heavily burdensome and all of that. And so how can we make it something that's much more appealing to be engaging in agriculture?
Yeah, exactly. And so, I grew up on a little farm back in Kenya, and my mother didn't have a bank account until I was in my 20s, which I always thought was so strange because, she worked on the farm. She did most of the work. She did a lot of coordinating. She was my father's right hand in terms of processes and everything, but only when it came to the finance did I see this misconnect. So of course, this partnership between innovation, finance, and all the other levers is very critical to give women that space that they can also be financially empowered to play in the smallholder assets, because that's where majority of the food production is happening. And I really get excited too about some of the work that Bear is doing with the Better Life Farming also in India. A lot of those pilots have also had women representation there, because you're right, how we collect the data and how we make recommendations need to incorporate that component of women, cultural aspects, and those hurdles that we are facing in that specific space based on our agenda, into how policies are influenced and how governance is made. So just to make sure we have a chance of having an equal playing ground, right? Because I think it's just about sharing information, educating people, whether it's on cultural context or the actual innovation or what policies might be in place. Often I hear there are policies that are in place that are very pro-women and pro-female gender, but they're not very easily communicated, right? So joining another copy chat, they were talking about how it would be nice to have these policies even translated into local languages, because that lack of context for women to understand that they are being advocated for is missing. So when you think of, now looking back at the food systems and the conversations that you were involved in, what would you say are some of the partnerships that are most critical for us to be successful at making an impactful change towards the food systems, maybe thinking about the smallholder or in any other context that you can give an example of?
We're increasingly seeing partnerships which are actually taking a multifaceted lens. And I think in some ways they're actually often where it's the most challenging. And what you're seeing is that often companies are coming together and organizations in a much more pre-competitive way, because they're realizing this requires much more joined up solutions. So rather than just coming in and saying, right, we're going to deal with improved, the growing of improved varieties of a particular crop, it's actually saying, okay, how do we work with smallholder farmers at a significant enough scale that actually this starts to really affect systems change in that area, from farm right through to fork. So it's not just the integrated nature of these partnerships, but these much more complex food, health, growing livelihoods, systems, food systems partnerships. And I think that's going to be the next generation of partnerships that I'm excited by.
Yeah, you're right. It's really going to take private sector and public sector coming together with the governmental agencies and the private industries, just really us working together into this one major goal, because you're right, it's very complex, very many opportunities for integration. But I also like that you always mentioned that it's also profitable. We don't have to reduce our incomes just because we want to be more sustainable. This is always sometimes a misconception.
What excites you about this agenda? You've been watching it, and being involved and engaged. What excites you about it?
What excites me the most is me having a space to use my voice. to tell my story, my perspective, and as like I shared, growing up on a farm in Kenya to now working at their big biotech industry, in parallel to that, running a nonprofit advocating for STEM for girls in Kenya. I think I just love having an opportunity where my voice matters. People want to hear my challenges, my thoughts. My thoughts are important. Just feeling a sense of value. That really excites me. But of course, I also really love food. So what's there not to be excited about, right? Yeah. So there's so much
That's
for us
exciting.
women to do.
I love that. I love that vision.
Yeah. It's the different spaces at which I'm able to integrate my experiences, my personal story. When we talk about food and we go, oh, women have issues with finance. I go, yes, I understand this because my mother, for the longest time, still had to go to get money from my father so we can pay the farmers, even though I was on the farm with her every day. And going through education and watching her get a bank account and her being financially empowered. And how this broadened their business experience when she had that access. And now seeing it from the other spectrum of being in a big biotech industry and seeing how we are interacting with smallholders, that we are making a space for that collaborative effort where women can leverage finance and innovation just to give them an additional advantage at being successful in farming. For me, that's empowering because I've been on both spectrums of the story and I go, this is amazing. And to see this in my short lifespan is very exciting, because I'm not that old, right? So it's been a very short amount of time and so much change. And I go, but we have so much more to do. And that is where my excitement comes in, because I go, but then I can voice other concerns that are not possibly on the table or haven't been thought of yet. And this is my power. This is my level of excitement and passion to bring in that passion and to tell that story, because I work in an ag company, but deep down inside, I'm a farm girl. And that's okay.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's exactly that. I mean, it's that passion, that vibrancy, that energy that we need at the moment, because there is a sense of urgency about what actually needs to be done. We do need to really change the way that we engage with food and food through food systems, the way food systems operate, and that change needs to be happening now. And we need that energy, that excitement, that that vision around sort of innovation, that link between global scientific agendas and locally rooted challenges and knowledge and problems. And so, brilliant. That's great.
Awesome. Thank you.
No, it's been a really nice chat over a virtual cup of coffee. I love it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it has to end now, it seems. Yeah. But it was really nice to meet you, and thank you for your time again.
Thanks, Anne. Yeah, it was lovely.